And that way the people listening at home can say hello. So hello, people in the recorded universe.
Hello.
Hello.
And we're just going to give it one more minute. I know there's a few more people trying to join.
That is a very iconic Sally Field photograph.
Yeah, William, that's fantastic.
So I just
Was
want
that
to
the Flying Nun? Yeah.
I was just going to say hi from Eastham. That's where we are.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Excellent. All right, well, I know that there will be a few more people joining us, but in the interest of time, just wanted to get started. Hi, Terry. I'm going to give just a quick introduction. If folks mute themselves just for a little bit, and then I'll ask you to unmute and you can introduce yourselves. All right. So hi, everybody. I'm Erica Streit-Kaplan. Oh dear. Monica says no sound. I'm hoping that will work out okay. I'm going to give my introduction and then head back to Monica if there's a problem. Again, oh, good. Erica Streit-Kaplan, along with Marilyn Stern, I direct the MEA program at Hebrew College, and we are just delighted to have you here tonight. If you see my attention shifting, it's because I'm trying to help somebody with tech or invite them into the room. But I'm really so excited to see all of you. As I said, we had such a large response to this event, and many people are participating, watching the video at a later time. So just by way of background, Hebrew College runs the MEA program under the auspices of the Adult Learning Program, and MEA is our sort of flagship program, and I'll tell you a little bit about that, but I'm going to have us do introductions first. So when I call your name, I'm just going to go around the boxes. Just unmute, say your name and where you are now or where you're from, and we're not going to have time for chatting, but if somebody is in the same place that you are or hails from your hometown, just give a wave or send them a chat. All right, Judy and Jack.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Well, we're in Eastham on Cape Cod and learned about MEA from a relative, so we're very excited to learn more. And I'm even registered for one of the MEA from Rabbi Gordon's MEA Select class starting tomorrow, so very excited. Thank you. Good to see everyone.
Thank you, Marlene.
Yes, Boston, Massachusetts, and I've been to many of your programs. I'm delighted with it online, so to speak.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Alan and Jerry.
I live in Lexington, and I've been thinking about taking MEA for many years, and I'm just recently retired, and I feel like I can now have the time to do it, so I'm excited.
Welcome. Thank you. Margie and Stephen.
Hi, we live in Arlington, and Margie has wanted to do this for many years, and she finally twisted my arm.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Andrea.
I live in New Bedford, which is about an hour and a half south of Boston. And I would like to just fill in all of the holes of my education.
Sounds good. Sharon?
Hi, my name is Sharon. I am from Newton and I grew up in Brookline.
Wonderful. Welcome.
Thank you.
Jenny.
Hi, I'm Jenny. I'm in Bloomington, Indiana. And I've just been trying to take advantage of a lot of online Jewish learning opportunities since the pandemic started. And I took a course this past semester through Hebrew College with for the adult learning with Rabbi Natan Margalit. So I wanted to look into this.
Excellent, great. Eileen.
Hi, I live in Glenmore, Pennsylvania. It's about an hour west of Philadelphia. And like someone else said, online learning is great. I'm in the middle of a online biblical Hebrew class right now, so I thought I'd try this as well.
Excellent, welcome. Randy.
Hi, everybody. I'm in Arlington, Virginia. I took the Maya program in '99. Absolutely loved it. It filled in. Had I not been thrown out of Hebrew school, I probably would have learned some of it, but I loved learning it and looking at coming back and learning again.
All right, Randy, the thrown out of Hebrew school story, we're going to need to hear that at a later
time. Offline.
Yeah. Thank you. Jill, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Jill Sandberg. I'm in Sharon, Massachusetts, and I also am soon to retire. And will have lots more space in my brain for new learning.
Lovely. Thank you, Jill. Terry. All right. Terry's having a little trouble with her phone, but that is Terry. And she lives in Newton. No, works in Newton and lives in Lexington. Monica. I fear that Monica's still having trouble hearing us.
So Erica, I suggested that she try headphones, but maybe when you're done with this go round, you can give her the dial-in number so that she can do the sound through her phone.
Absolutely, I would love to do that. In fact, William, why don't you introduce yourself and then let me help Monica with the tech thing.
Perfect.
Okay.
Wonderful. So my name, of course, is William. I'm in Montreal, Quebec. And I think that's all we had to say. I'll keep it short as to not impede. And I'm still trying to plug my laptop, so forgive me if I'm off with my camera. Thank you.
No problem. This is by far the most diverse geographic group, even during COVID. That is just wonderful that people have found their way to this exceptional program. Erica, do you want another minute? I'm prepared to begin and go ahead.
Yes. Yeah. Why don't you do that while I try to figure out how to help Monica?
No problem. Okay.
Well, so then.
So I'll introduce myself and
okay.
we'll begin our study together this evening. Good evening, everybody. Just to give you a sense of the course of things for the next 40 minutes or so, we're going to do a little tech study, which is designed to give you an indication of what the experience of a Maya classroom and what of a Maya Zoom classroom is like. So we'll do like a bit of a model class. But then afterwards, we will take time, once you've had that experience, to go over the Maya program in a little bit more depth and give you a chance to ask your questions. Because it's always important to review the fact that while Maya is a somewhat, there's more reading involved. It's a bit more interactive than a lot of the adult learning that you did, but there are no exams and it is a relaxed atmosphere, though, again, a commitment to a 2-year program going through biblical, rabbinic, medieval, and modern Judaisms. And what we try to do, and in particular, I'll be teaching the first semester for the online component on biblical. And what we try to do is ground ourselves a little bit in comparative religion, which is part of my academic background, is in the teaching of comparative religion, particularly Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And I am also a congregational rabbi in Canton, Mass, and I live in Newton. I think that's what's important to know about me for the moment. But the other thing I'm grounded in, besides the study of comparative religion, is trying to build the connections from one semester of Maya to the next. So one of the things that is true about the class in biblical is that for the last session, we begin to look forward to what the later tradition does with the biblical legacy. So the Maya program is designed to be 4 distinct units, but units that move into each other and play into each other and create that sense of continuity, even if the teachers differ from semester to semester. So that's a little bit by way of introduction. And now I'd like to say a word about what we are going to look at and study tonight. Erica, was there one more thing you wanted to add, please?
I did. Oh, good. All right. It looks like Monica is able to join us. So I just wanted to give you the larger overview. What is Maya? Maya is 100 in Hebrew, and it represents 100 hours of Jewish learning. And that is what takes place over those 4 semesters. And for those of you starting in the fall, you would have these 4 semesters, and then we have a lovely online graduation that would be in the spring of 2024. I wanted to let you know that we have over 4,000 people who have gone through this program, and Maya has been around since 1995, so over 25 years. This is a really special program. On some level, we have kind of saturated the market in the Boston area, so it is just really exciting to be able to expand our reach, to capture people who took it in Boston or never got a chance to, but also because of the benefits of virtual learning, right, to get to include so many of you. Let's see if there's anything else key before I turn it back over to Rabbi Gordon. So as I said in the email this morning, we're offering 2 classes for the beginning of Maya. So Rabbi Gordon is going to be teaching one of them. That's the evening class that's online. And then we are planning to have an in-person class with Rabbi Neil Gold, who is equally wonderful. And that is hopefully going to be at Hebrew College in Newton, Massachusetts on Tuesday mornings. So both of those classes are now open for registration. I sent you the link, and I can send it when I do a follow-up at a later date. So just wanted you to know that that is available. This taste is for everyone. If you want to come to this taste and never do anything with Maya or Hebrew College again, that is also excellent. We're just glad to have you here tonight. I would like to officially introduce our wonderful instructor for the evening, Rabbi Leonard Gordon. And he is a dynamic instructor who is a congregational rabbi in Canton, Massachusetts, but served for over 16 years in the Germantown Jewish Center, which is a conservative synagogue in Philadelphia, known for being a community of communities. And I have been there, and it is really great. Rabbi Gordon teaches about rabbinic literature, history, as he said, comparative religion, and he has taught 3 out of the 4 sections of Maya. So I'll turn it over to you. We'll do the study part until 8 or a little bit before 8. And at that point, we'll pivot, and I can answer any questions you have about the Maya program overall or logistically. All right, that is it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Erica. Okay, so I wanted to use as my starting point one of the terms that has often been used to summarize the Jewish people, and that is the people of the book. And when we talk about the people of the book, we're always referring to the Hebrew Bible, to the Bible as being that central scripture. But the interesting thing is that while the Bible is at the center of much of later Jewish literature, we study the Bible through a lens of commentaries and rewritings and revisions. And what I wanted to demonstrate in our half hour together is once from the storytelling tradition and once from the legal tradition, how is it that the later tradition, the rabbinic medieval tradition, is what dominates how we read the Bible? That the Jewish people are not biblical literalists. And we have always been people, when you have the classic rabbinic Bible, is a little bit of the Bible surrounded by a rich array of translations and commentaries, so that before you move from one verse to the next, you might have taken a trip through 2,000 years of Jewish interpretive history. And that is in many ways what you're going to be learning in the 4 semesters of Mea, from the earliest rabbinic commentaries to the medieval philosophic and mystical commentaries to contemporary secular, feminist, and denominational readings of the earlier tradition. We are about layers upon layers. So that's what we're going to look at. I want to start with a text that is very well known, the first verse of the book of Genesis. So the first verse of the book of Genesis says, "In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth." That is the standard translation. When we think about that as the opening line of the first book of this thing called the Bible, what's missing from that verse? And let me just open that up for a moment. If it says, "In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth," what are some of the questions that you might have that are unresolved by that rather abrupt opening? And if you want to respond, please just unmute yourself and jump right in.
Who's God?
Who is God? Does God have a story? Where does God come from? If you read Hesiod's Theogony, gods come from other gods, and it's through a process often of sexual reproduction and of violent battles between generations of divinities. So there is this sense of, where did God come from? Does God have a story? Other questions that you might ask.
I wonder, how did the beginning get started?
What does the word beginning even mean in that context, Judy, right? If, how do we tell time? We tell time from the sun and the moon and the stars. Time is something that emerges out of the created universe. So if there were no sun and moon and stars, and by the way, the sun and the moon were created on day 4. This is a topic for another day. Light and darkness were created on day 1. How does that work? Okay, but just to go back to your question, why did God choose to create the world at a particular moment in time? Why not earlier? Why not later? What motivated God to create the world? What was missing? What was lacking in the world? If God, as let's say Spinoza says, if God and nature are one and God fills all creation, how could God create if God is everything and everywhere? So how was there something that was not God which facilitated the creation? Okay, other questions? There's one more big one. Where did the stuff come from? If God created a world, a cosmos, it doesn't say here God created it out of nothing by going poof. In fact, the operative verb in much of Genesis chapter 1 is that God separated light from darkness, water from dry land. Things get separated for the world as we know it to come into being. Okay, that's another question. Where did the stuff come from? Okay, so, and I should point out, by the way, for the physicists and astronomers in our group, in the theory of the Big Bang, that's also an open question, right? Everything starts from a little dot, which then expands and explodes. But where did the dot come from, this highly compressed dot? So it's sort of a question of origins. Where does God come from? What motivated God? How does time work? And where did the stuff come from? There's a lot that is not answered in the opening verse of the book of Genesis. So we're going to now take a quick trip down some of how those gaps are filled in. Okay. Everybody can see the text. I hope it's readable. The mystics, Jewish mystics and philosophers, are often not fanciful readers of the text, but are hyper-literal readers of the text. In other words, one thing that's true in the interpretive tradition is that often they really ask questions about the words that go beyond our normal translation. Now, while Maya does not require or assume any knowledge of Hebrew, you will notice throughout Maya that sometimes we make reference to Hebrew words which are important for following. So the first word is bereshit. Bereshit, the word reshit means beginning or first. Be, the particle be, can mean with. So rather than translate bereshit as in the beginning, we could translate it as with reshit. So we need to know what is reshit. And for that, we have to go to the book of Proverbs, chapter 8. So hold on a second. Let me ask. Okay. Margie, could I ask you to read out loud? Are you okay with that?
Okay, go ahead.
The Lord created me, Lady Wisdom, at the beginning, Reshit, of his work, the first of his acts of long ago. Ages ago, I was set up at first, before the beginning of the earth. When there were no depths, I was brought forth. When there were no springs abounding with water. Before the mountains had been shaped, before the hills, I was brought forth. When he had not yet made earth and fields, or the world's first bits of soil. When he established the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep. When he made firm the skies above. When he established the fountains of the deep. When he assigned to the sea its limit, so that the waters might not transgress his command, when he marked out the foundations of the earth. Then I was beside him, like a master worker, and I was daily his delight, rejoicing before him always, rejoicing in his inhabited world and delighting in the human race.
Thank you, Margie. So hold on one second. I'm going to just stop sharing for a moment so we can all see each other. That's an amazing passage in the book of Proverbs. It says that, or what did you notice? Who is speaking here? I put in parentheses, it's Lady Wisdom. It's Chokhmah. So what is in the Jewish tradition, when we talk about wisdom, we think about Torah, T-O-R-A-H, the Bible and its interpretations. So in chapter 8 of Proverbs, the Torah, wisdom, is understood as a female presence. And this female presence, when was this female presence created?
Prior to Elohim.
Prior to, brilliant, by the way, Stephen, we'll get back to that about Elohim, but before the world was created. There's that long list that Margie just read, all of the things that God created in the world, and before any of them were created, God created wisdom. And then the second to last verse, I was beside him like a master worker. So in other words, God is the general contractor, and wisdom is the blueprint, the architect, the master plan out of which the world was created. So when it says in Genesis with Reshit, and it says in Proverbs, I was Reshit, I was the first, and I am wisdom, I am Torah, basically what the tradition is going to say is that before the world was created, the Torah was created. How is that a problem? What's in the Torah? What are some of the things you might find in the Bible?
Stories of people, of humans.
Stories of people, and as Andrea is pointing out incredulously, there were no people. If the Bible tells the story of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, how could the Bible have been written and existed before the world was created? If the Bible contains laws and poetry and history and saga and all of this stuff, what we're now learning by conflating Proverbs chapter 8 with Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, what we're now learning is that the Bible is not important because of the stories it tells. The Bible is important because it's a roadmap for how the world was created. In fact, in some ways, what the Bible is, according to this reading, the Bible is the cosmic DNA of the universe. And think of it. What is DNA? For those of you who have studied chains of DNA, it's a bunch of letters. What is the Bible? It's a string of letters. It's code. It's computer code. It's the code that tells you how to create a world. So when you study the Bible, the least interesting thing about the Bible might be its literal meaning. What's most interesting about the Bible is how the Bible teaches us timeless truths about a reality that was established before creation. God looked at the Torah, and from looking at the Torah, created the world in which we live.
So where
Yeah, please.
Where does that Torah come from that God looked at?
It was God's first act of creation. In other words, like an architect, the first thing an architect needs before building a building is a blueprint. So if the Torah is the blueprint of creation, it's the first act in the creative process. Let me share with you here. Eileen, could you just read that last passage? It's a passage from rabbinic literature, from the rabbinic commentary to the book of Genesis, written about 1,000 years after the story of creation was written in Genesis. So go ahead. In the beginning.
In the beginning, 2,000 years before the heaven and the earth, 7 things were created. The Torah written with black fire on white fire and lying in the lap of God.
Okay. And then they go on to list other things that were there from the beginning, but that's the important one for us. I want to teach you now something very important about numbers in the Bible. Numbers in the Bible are almost always symbolic and not meant to be read literally as numbers. 2,000 years is an eon. 2,000 years is a giant block of time. So it's basically what this is saying is, in the real beginning, one block of time before the world was created, God created the blueprint that God would need to create the world. So for Jews, in this reading, and one thing you're going to have to come to understand, or that you will come to understand, is that we throw a lot of things out, and we're not saying this is the only way Jews have understood it, or this is what the text literally means. What we're saying is this is a major interpretive tradition of the text, is that the Torah, containing the DNA of creation, pre-exists the world, and it's how God is manifest in our world. So think about that. Where is the Torah scroll kept in the synagogue? Way up front in an ark. We dress a Torah scroll like a king with a crown and like a high priest with a breastplate. We march around the synagogue holding the Torah scroll, and people kiss it, and people treat it with awe and reverence. It's as if we're saying, this book with letters in it is how we know God. It's how God is manifest in the world. So that now is a whole new understanding of what Torah is. It's not a book to be accepted or rejected as history or as ethics. It's a book that lets us know something deeply true about the world we live in, as it has been interpreted and understood through thousands of years of the lived experience of our people, writing book upon book and rooted in some fundamental way in this text. Now, I want to just take one detour and then we'll come back to this larger point. In Christianity, what has the place of Torah? What is the pre-existing reality that was with God when God created the world?
Jesus.
Jesus. In other words, in the first century, there would have been a lively conversation amongst Jews and Christians about what was the nature of the pre-existing presence that was with God when God created the world. Jews would have said that presence, called wisdom, chokhmah, Torah. In Greek, the word would have been logos, L-O-G-O-S. That logos was the Torah. For Christians, for the Jews who came to believe in Jesus as the fulfillment of messianic prophecy, that pre-existing thing was a person, not a book. So in many ways, and by the way, in terms of the church, what is located in a church in the same location where we put a Torah scroll? The wafer and the wine. Instead of the reading table, it's an altar table that's in the front. And the altar table and the reading table both come out of the same architectural design. And in some fundamental ways, it's two different ways of understanding how we meet God in a world where the temple no longer exists. For the Jews, we now meet God when the temple is destroyed in the end of the biblical period. We now meet God in study. In Christianity, we meet God not just in the study of a text, but also in the biography and teachings of a person. So, questions or thoughts on this part of it?
So I have a thought, and I guess it is a question. If the Torah is in its location in our shuls, it would seem that Jesus on the crucifix is in a similar position in a Christian church, high and above everybody, looking down.
Right. And again, in Protestant churches where you wouldn't have a crucifix, let's say, but the idea, what I really wanted to make parallel, Stephen, was the altar table where the communion takes place as being similar structurally to the Torah reading table in the synagogue, where people come up to take an aliyah. So there's that same sense of coming up to the table, but again, it gets played out differently. Again, not a major focus for our study, but I think it's something important to, to be aware of. Other thoughts? So do you see why this means that, excuse me, the meaning of the text is explosive? The meaning of the text can go in so many different directions because the text is nothing less than how we meet God. So it can't be limited to just the historical, literal, legal meaning of the text. Those things are all there, but as you'll discover in the medieval and rabbinic units, Jewish mystics and philosophers take the biblical text in surprising and fascinating directions, and they are rule governed, and you'll learn some of those rules and what they are. Okay, so I want to share with you one last reading of Genesis chapter 1. Let's go back here. So you see, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, and then we retranslated it as with Reshit, with the Torah, God created the heaven and the earth. But I want to offer you one more literal, hyper-literal meaning of the text. In Hebrew, every verb contains a subject. So in English, we say he spoke. In Hebrew, we say amar, which simply means he spoke. Okay. Oh, and by the way, I just want to mention, I noticed that I did not adapt the passage from Proverbs into gender neutral language. I will correct that. We are moving towards using gender neutral language as much as possible, even in our biblical citations. Hebrew, the verb is, the subject is in the verb. So when it says, with Reshit, bara, that can mean with Reshit, with Torah, God created. But God is not specified. It's just there is a third person singular masculine noun, a verb in the word created. So you can say and translate it as with beginning, with the Torah, the invisible, unknown God, the God who transcends everything, created Elohim, the heavens and the earth, so that God created three things, one of which were the Elohim. What would Elohim mean then? It would mean the angels, the lower level gods, the things that are between humanity and divinity. So if you retranslate that sentence as not in the beginning Elohim bara, but in the beginning the unknowable God bara Elohim, so that Elohim is the object, not the subject, that answers a question that we used to have. When God says, let us make man in God's image, let us make the human being in our image, who is the R? So now we know that the R could be the Elohim, these intermediary beings. And that solves the problem of what it means when it says, in the beginning, God created. Or when it says, let us make man. You might also notice, what does it say in the Ten Commandments? You shall have no other gods. Can anyone finish that commandment? You shall have no other gods before me. It doesn't say you shall have no other gods. It says no other gods are as important to you as I am. So the Elohim in that sentence, in that new translation, now explains that verse. And I'll give you one other. Mi chamocha b'Elohim Adonai. Who is like unto you among the gods, O our God? So in other words, in the Bible, in the earliest layers of the Bible, they're not at monotheism yet. There's not only one heavenly being, there's lots of heavenly beings. But we are told there's only one heavenly being that matters to the family of Abraham and that matters to Israel. So one of the things that we'll learn in the biblical class is the history of God, how God develops, changes, and grows from being a local tribal God to being, in Isaiah, the God of the whole cosmos. Okay. Anything, is this more or less clear? I know this is a tremendous amount and this all gets unpacked much more in the class, but if that's okay. Any questions or anything that's unclear that anyone wants to mention?
Just one quick thing.
Sure.
I'm confused about the Elohim. Are Elohim the same as angels? Are angels considered other gods?
So it's complicated. Elohim sometimes means the one God, sometimes means our God, and sometimes means these other divinities. So when I say angels here, I really mean more intermediary beings that are between human and the one God. The other thing that the word Elohim means, by the way, in the Bible is Elohim can also mean a human judge. So why is God sometimes Yud-He, Vav-He, Adonai, or Yahweh, Jehovah? And why is God sometimes called Elohim? And again, in the later tradition, they'll say they use the word Elohim when they want to talk about God as a judge, and they use the word Adonai when they want to talk about God as merciful. So many of you have probably heard that dichotomy, God of mercy, God of justice. So we have two different names, and they are designed to point to two different realities about how we experience God. And we'll talk more about angels for those of you who take the class. So we have 10 more minutes. Let's look at a legal text now that we've looked at a storytelling text. Okay. So, Sharon, can I ask you to read the passage from Leviticus?
Human intention, is that it?
That's it.
Okay.
Just that one sentence from Leviticus 11.
Okay. As to any food that may be eaten, it shall become unclean. If it came in contact with water, it shall become unclean.
Okay, let's stop there. So you have a bushel of apples. Okay, and I'm going to show you a picture of a bushel of apples. So you have these apples. You want to eat them, and you need to take some of them and give them to the priest, and others will then be available to you to eat for yourself. But that means that the apples need to be kept in a state of ritual purity. So that is a picture of a dead lizard, my favorite kind of a dead creeping thing. If a dead creeping thing falls into a bushel of apples, and the dead creeping thing is dry and the apples are dry, you simply brush off the top layer of the apples and the apples are fine. But if it says here, but if the apples came in contact with water, then the bushel of apples, if they touch a dead creeping thing, in other words, a source of impurity, if it touches water, it becomes unclean. Okay? We're not going to go into all of what uncleanness means here, but it basically means that you can't donate any of those apples to the priest. And if you were going to the temple, you couldn't eat those apples because the apples would make you ritually unclean as well. The Bible is clear. Apples plus water plus dead creeping thing equals impure. What the Bible's not interested in is the intention of the individual farmer. The Bible never asks, did the farmer want the water to be there in the first place? Could somebody give me an example? Why would a farmer want a bushel of apples to have water on them?
Maybe they're being washed. Maybe he's rinsing them because they're dirty.
Maybe he's rinsing them, or maybe some of you have been to supermarkets. What do they do in supermarkets that's always annoying and weird? They turn on these little jets of spray to make the fruit and vegetables look a little bit shinier and more appetizing for purchase. So a farmer might have done it to keep the apples fresh, to clean the apples, to help market the apples. Why might a farmer have wanted the apples to stay dry?
So they couldn't become ritually impure.
First of all, for that, but I want to think of just more farmery stuff. Maybe he put the apples on top of his house to dry in the sun during the summer when there's no rain in the land of Israel, to make dried apples so that they could last during the winter. So maybe he's drying them out so that they'll be preserved. The Bible is not interested in what the farmer's motivation was. The temple gets destroyed in the year 70 of the Common Era. And when the temple gets destroyed, the new group coming slowly to lead the Jewish people, have a new theory of how Judaism works. They say that now that there's no temple anymore, the way Judaism works is based on human intention. In other words, when you get married, you say, with this exchange of rings, I am sacred to you, you are sacred to me. The individual Israelite creates a bond of sanctity. On Friday night, we have a glass of wine to begin the Sabbath meal with the blessing over wine, because our blessing a full cup of wine on Friday night brings in Shabbat, and we call that Kiddush. We sanctify the day. So the individual Israelite householder becomes now an agent for sanctification in a world where the temple doesn't exist anymore and the priests cannot resolve our problems. We need a new way of doing Judaism. So here is how the rabbis rewrite that law from Leviticus. Leviticus says, if it comes in contact with water, impure. Here's what the Mishnah says. The Mishnah is the first book of Rabbinic Judaism, published around the year 220 of the Common Era. Any liquid which in the beginning is acceptable, even though at the end it is not acceptable, or which at the end is acceptable, even though at the beginning it is not acceptable, is under the law if water be put. In other words, the Mishnah takes a passive construction, if it came into contact with water, and redoes the vowel pointing to make it active. If the farmer purposely put water at any stage in the production of the harvest, if it was meeting the farmer's desires, then the water makes the bushel of apples impure if it touches a dead creeping thing. But if the water is there against the will of the farmer and a dead creeping thing falls on it, pure or impure, it's pure. What would the author of Leviticus have thought about that? That was insane. That how could that work? No, water magically functions to, it's an on or not magically. Water is an on-off switch for impurity. And what do the rabbis say? There's no more on-off switch for purity and impurity. Now it depends on the intention of the individual Israelite. So that's what I wanted to show you. One example of how when you start reading even such a simple, well-known verse as Genesis 1:1, there are worlds of new meaning in terms of how that verse has been interpreted over time. And the place we start is by asking every question we can ask about what's missing from the text. And then in legal texts, the transition from biblical to rabbinic Judaism is a transition from a temple-based religion where things operate automatically, to a religion that is going to be based around study and prayer and the acts of sanctification of the individual Israelite man and woman. So my friends, that's what I wanted to offer you as a little bit of an introduction to some of the riches of the kinds of things you'll experience in Maya. And Erica, I'm going to turn things back over to you now so that we can answer your questions and give you a deeper understanding of what the experience is like week by week. Wonderful to meet all of you tonight.
Thank you, Rabbi Gordon. We have a little more time. Were there any sort of final questions for the rabbi before we get into logistics?
Sure,
I
Jen.
have a question. I don't know if this is exactly the right time, but I'll just ask it. So when in the actual classes, when source sheets like this are shown, will there usually be Hebrew to look at as well?
I sometimes include Hebrew, for the biblical class. The most basic text is going to be a Bible. And for those of you who have Hebrew, I will recommend the Jewish Publication Society Bible, where there's Hebrew and English, so that you and we might refer occasionally. But you should know that all texts for the class will be posted in advance, so you'll have an opportunity to look at them and to download them if you'd like. But I generally do not always offer the original Hebrew unless I'm going to refer to it in class.
William, I saw you had your hand up earlier. Did you want to jump in?
It was just a small comment. It was really interesting that passage on in Proverb 8:11 or something like that I forgot. In the sense that this is kind of thing that you'll be reading, but you won't overthink it. You'll just keep reading, and you'll never question yourself. Who is that lady wisdom? Why doesn't it work? So it was just nice doing that little exercise and seeing like, yeah, I would have never even taken the time to think and question myself about it. So I really like that.
Exactly. Thank you.
Any other text study questions? Okay, excellent. So my introduction got a little truncated. So before we talk about some of the logistics, I just wanted to again, go through Hebrew College's Maya program. It's 4 semesters. We take breaks in the summer. So the first semester is Bible, and then we have Rabbinics. So that would be in the spring, and that's really studying the experience of, rabbis taking and interpreting what the Bible says and turning it into something that was more appropriate at that modern time. Then we move forward ahead to the medieval period, which is actually quite long and varied. And then again to the modern period, which is where we are now, but is also very long and very varied. And you'll see, as Rabbi Gordon did, there'll be references to like the practice of Judaism currently, as well as imagining what the practices might have been at different times. And I also wanted to highlight that while all of this is really grounded in the Jewish Bible and the Jewish experience, we have a lot of students who are not Jewish and just very curious, and that is absolutely fine and welcome. I saw a hand up, and
it was me, Sharon. I'm sorry, you blipped out on my computer. When does it start in the fall? What's the?
So we always start after the Jewish high holidays, which happen to be very late this year. So the fall in this case is either late October for the evening class and very early November, November 1st for the in-person morning class.
What month would the Jewish high holidays come that they would be on time?
Exactly. Yes,
early,
right.
Or they're late.
Yes,
It's
early.
Like, oh, that was a perfect week for them to come. But I didn't hear you, so thank you on that.
I have been working at Hebrew College now for 8 years, and I'm Jewish my whole life, but it's really taken me a while to really understand, okay, because we have this Jewish leap month, it really does mean that, you know, things feel early or things feel late, because unlike the American or Gregorian calendar where we have that one day, with lunar months, you can't just add a day or two or three. Great. All right. Any questions? I have. Oh, good. Go ahead. Go ahead, Judy.
That's a really basic question. So, will the Maya session starting in the fall, the 2 years, do you think it will, all 2 years will be available on Zoom?
Yes, thank you for asking that. Right. So we currently have a cohort of students who started on Zoom and are going to continue on Zoom. So obviously, for those of you who don't live within driving distance of Newton, Massachusetts, right, if you sign on for a class on Zoom, we promise that you will get to continue it on Zoom, right? And what is nice is that you'll have the opportunity with your cohort to really build community. Certainly not the same as, you know, sharing a snack in a conference room, but we have heard from students who took all 4 semesters online that there really is this wonderful opportunity to learn and study together and share insights back and forth. So over the course of those 2 years, you'll be studying with a lot of the same people. People can shift from time to time, or sometimes we have people who want to come and take just one semester. But for those of you, you know, 2 years from now, you can be kind of celebrating. We have our graduation on Zoom because we have one in-person class, but one virtual. We are all in on the virtual learning experience. You know, it is not the only thing that we're doing, but we are committed to continuing it.
Thank you.
I want to just mention that class used to be 2.5 hours, a bit longer than that. Under Zoom and COVID, we've moved class to a 2-hour block, and recognizing that 2 hours of sitting in a chair is also a bit much. At least when I teach, there's always a 10-minute break at the 1-hour mark so that people can get up and stretch. And although we won't share snacks, people are encouraged, you know, to have coffee and Danish with them and all good things. So just wanted to give you a sense that every class will have a break in it.
Yes. Jerry, yes.
Just wonder how large the group usually is.
Wonderful, great question. So the classes range from, I would say, about, you know, 12, 14, up to 20, maybe 22. We think that sort of 15 to 18 is a really ideal size, but we're flexible in terms of that. We definitely think if you're looking at a typical computer screen, you don't want to have to be flipping to another page. So you'll be able to see everyone on the same page. It could be if it's 23, 24 people. Go ahead, Jenny.
I think one of you mentioned that there are like readings to do between the classes. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah.
What type, how much?
Excuse me. Yes. In general, I'll just speak about the Bible class. Actually, I'll say a word about what I did in Rabbinics as well. In general, I have one book that is the text. In this case, you know, a Hebrew Bible, and then one book which offers background for each week's topic. And the book that I'll be using for the fall is Mark Brettler's How to Read the Jewish Bible. And then occasionally I'll have, you know, photographs I want to share, outlines of things to share, you know, individual little passages. In general, I have avoided scholarly articles. And, you know, Brettler's book is a very, very, you know, accessible and readable text. It's designed for exactly this kind of adult audience. But if anybody is interested in pursuing topics in more detail or getting a sense of the scholarship on it, I'll be glad to share that material with you as supplemental bibliography. But in general, I tend to want to not load up too much on that. So when I taught rabbinics, I had a 1-volume anthology of Talmudic texts and one or two works of fiction and nonfiction that make the rabbinic era come alive. So for some of you, reading a fictional account of love, marriage, study in the rabbinic era will open it up and humanize it. So I try to offer some, books like that as well, with the recognition that there are multiple learning styles.
And about how much reading would you guess there would be before each class?
Maybe 30, 30 pages or so, a chapter in Brettler, and a couple of chapters, in the Bible. Maybe at a certain point, and I'll give you more than a week's notice, it would be good for people to read through the book of Genesis, but I wouldn't assign that until after we've done some text study together to give you a sense of what to look for. And as William was saying, you are very encouraged to read the Bible slowly and as much as possible for you guys to pair up with each other. Some of you might take this as a couple, but others we can pair up so that maybe you could even meet once between classes with a study partner and have that opportunity to get to know each other and to read the text together. So we try to create, especially recognizing the limitations of Zoom, we try to create opportunities for community building as part of this as well.
Yes. So are there any other questions?
Just one.
Oh, great. Go ahead.
How many beginnings are there?
Exactly. Yes, there are more questions than answers. If you haven't had a chance to take a look at it, the frequently asked questions that I attached to the email should answer a bunch of questions. I wanted to highlight that one of the most important things is that we are generously funded by Combined Jewish Philanthropy, CJP, which is the Jewish Federation in the Boston area. We want to make this class financially accessible to everyone. It's $650 for the academic year. And if that is something that I'm having trouble coming up with that word, a barrier. If that fee would be a barrier for you, we really want to do everything that we can to make it so that you can participate. So I just wanted to make sure you knew that and that was available.
And I just put my email in the chat. So if anybody would like to, if you have a question later on that would be better directed to me than to Maya and Erica, please feel free to send me an email and I'll be glad, to respond if you're interested in, anything about the class.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, thank you all for being here. It's really a delight to see you. And to those of you who are watching later, hope you enjoyed the learning. Again, if you have questions, you can email maya@hebrewcollege.edu or lgordon613@gmail.com. And we look forward to being in touch. Have a great evening, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.